Yeah, interesting point you guys make. Okay. Let's get a little bit serious. Cryptocurrency tokens. Where do we start? Yeah, I mean, you've the feverish pitch in which Bitcoin keeps gaining traction. Ethereum, Dogecoin, especially supported by all of those memes and all of those satire that's coming from Elon Musk and the rise of um, and then of course game stocks. What really happened with the GameStop saga? That hedge funds clearly they won with what how it worked out, how the botch the climb and the growth of the share price. And now we're seeing it with NFT, non-fungible tokens. You guys remember we talked a little bit about NFT. That was like 3 years ago, but linked with Mass Mobile, what I was doing, Mass Mobile, the mathematical video game, and then cross with experiential technology. But I know you guys are like, okay, this guy maybe is going to Japan. That's why his head is in the clouds. But we can see what's happening. Well, I just want to dwell with the fundamentals here, okay? Because everybody's just looking about what's happening here. Are we going into trading, or are we going into the NFTs? Maybe we'll create a lot of our artwork and put it online. I've done that myself. I reserve to tell you how much I'm making with it. But what I want to play is the long game, which is when eventually institutional funds come into play. So this is all driven by retail players, retail investors. And you're just casting this wave going on because it doesn't really make any sense when you dwell on the fundamentals. Say, for instance, in the US, the housing prices are going up. There's now a housing boom going up, but the housing boom has no proper correlation with the economy. Housing boom really goes up because people are getting jobs, and because people are getting jobs, people are going to get their mortgage loans, and then they use it. So people have lost their jobs. Even the ones who have jobs, chances are that they might not retain their jobs for long. Where on earth is the housing booms coming from? And the same thing happening with Dow Jones and Nasdaq. It's crazy that Tesla is what it is when you know that when you talk about units of cars produced and put into the market, Toyota does more. And so the money just going inside there because of electric vehicles, the mania with new clean energy, and because of what happened with the GameStops, now it has been piped back into Bitcoin and NFTs, and we saw Bevel selling his artwork for $69 million. It's crazy. K-shaped recovery, clearly, because it's not going on in the real market. And in the real market, in the open market, in main streets, the money is not really going to come in anytime soon because of Biden tax hikes. So nobody wants to liquidate and put their money in the real market where it will be taxed. Rather, just leave it in the retail markets and the capital markets in cryptocurrencies, because that way you'll be gaining capital gains and it's not an income, so the tax does not apply. Nobody wants to liquidate it. The money is not coming into this space. So institutional investors, hedge funds, capital funds, equity funds. We're talking about people who manage, say, the pension fund of the New York Police Department, the Chicago Teachers Union. These are billions and billions, and when they get into play, things really change. So I believe everybody is looking to us. What would be the assets that will suit the institutional funds? And that's the discussion for today. You can find more uh, on. Well, this is yeah. I think you can Google, you can find it out on YouTube, because Poutin is going to disable it. But this is a Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. Check out what he had to say. He said something about he wasn't necessarily interested in Bitcoin, but when he saw the regulators in Canada and in Switzerland, and even the regulators in Florida recently have started accepting Bitcoin as ETF, exchange traded funds. And so he knew that he made the regulators create this framework, then institutional funds would come in, and that's when he's going to jump in. So I just want to dwell on institutional funds and where we can maximize as, my people, so to say. Because institutional funds are interested in assets that have a perfect proof against, they are what's interested in the risks. Okay. And so risk analysis is very important. Make sure that it's well proof. And the most common asset against any risks is land. Let's not kid ourselves. We've seen what is happening with Bill Gates buying so much land. They are buying that land not because they are expecting hyperinflation in the open market, where say goods and services, you know, going to Walmart and the prices will go up. No, inflation is not taking place there because inflation is already taking place somewhere. There's a substitute, which is the capital market. The capital gains there in the Nasdaq and Dow and Tesla and now in the Bitcoin. So that has really helped suck out what would have been the hyperinflation that came with the massive printing of currencies in the US, in the euro, the first world countries, Japan, Korea. Everybody did massive quantitative easing so that it would be, a shock absorber to the economic shutdown that took place last year and a little bit of this year. The recovery would be slow after the pandemic. So with this massive printing, it's just classical economics that is now more units of currency chasing the few or the limited amount of goods and services. And so everything should have gone up. But no, we're not really seeing that because all of the money that has been printed is now going into the capital markets, going into cryptocurrencies. And these guys know, let us go and buy land, because land will do one thing. It could have a resale value and also there could be yield. No, not necessarily, because I think these guys are looking towards the most important and the most fundamental advantages that land could have in this blockchain fever is asset tokenization. And they can take their assets, their land assets, and digitize it, have a token, and put it on the blockchain. And that has been going on for over 8 years now. And these guys are betting on that. Because if you can spend collectively $69 million on the Bevel art, and it has been fragmentized. There's fragmentation because they put it into fragments and get it more and more and more through tokenization. It's now going to be worth close to about $250 million. So what better place, which is land, inherent value, is finite. Another important aspect of the blockchain of cryptocurrency is that it's finite. It cannot just be printed. And then the fragmentation, when you take pieces of the digitized asset, can only be increased, and it can all be validated by the blockchain. So of course, my connection being here in Japan, I like dwelling on what are the advantages from our own side, because when you talk about land, we have so many advantages. Some of us have ancestral land, and I like using the instance of cocoa. Okay, so cocoa is supposedly 70% of cocoa in the whole world comes from West Africa. That's what the stats have been saying for quite a long time. Some of us have reasons to doubt that. Some of us has valid reasons to doubt that. First of all, take for instance Japan. Japan, because of their geographical location, they are strategically placed to be a very big player when it comes to cocoa. Surprisingly, right? But that shouldn't be so surprising, because UK, who controls the commodity price of cocoa, they don't produce cocoa. The advantages that we have with cocoa in West Africa are just humongous, because cocoa uh, cannot be synthetically made. It's not like wine. Some of these wines or Chardonnays that you can make them in a lab. No, that the real strong ascorbic scent from the cocoa bean is not something that can be really recreated. And the exclusivity, that 70%, supposed 70%, and I'm going to that, comes from only West Africa. And cocoa is consumed by a European culture. And I would now say even a big Asian culture, because in Japan we have like this kawaii culture. And the most recent cocoa or chocolate related technologies, Japanese crates that sells lots of sweets or kashi. Even in Japanese culture, when you want to wish somebody good luck, you give them a Kit Kat bar, a chocolate bar, Kit Kat. It's made by Nestle. So going back to this, how can we make the most out of it? Because some of us have access to that land. I have access to land that has even been with my family for 300 years. It's finite and it grows cocoa. Um, because, say, for instance, I just want to show you a description. How does the cocoa come leaves West Africa? This because geographically we're supposed to be disadvantaged in West Africa in the sense that much of all of global trade is taking place this way. It's taking place from the east. And so the cocoa ships or ships laden with cocoa do not necessarily go up into Europe. Some of them do when it comes to going to the UK, but how do they access the big Asian market? They don't really go up and through the Mediterranean Sea, through North Atlantic. They don't go down the Cape of Good Hope. How do they get to Japan here? As the ships go through the Atlantic to the US, pass through the Panama Canal, then empty themselves through the Pacific Ocean. When you're heading over here, this is Japan, just close to the equator. And not necessarily upper hemisphere, but sort of like better sailing conditions for ships to go over there. Now that gives them a strategic position because of this. Japan can consume lots of the cocoa coming out from Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, process it and sell it to China, sell it to Korea, sell it to all of these big markets here. So little wonder that as a scholar, Japan places more premium on scholars coming from Ghana compared to Nigeria, and that is because of the cocoa advantages they have. Now, another thing is that they will let us know in a way and say, oh, that they produce cocoa in Southeast Asia, especially the South Pacific, all of the Marshall Islands, a little bit of Indonesia and Malaysia. Listen, these countries are closer to China. Yeah, they're all in the east, the Southeast Pacific area. They're closer to China. China is the big industrial hub of the world. China is industrialized. Taiwan is industrialized. India, even the Indonesia, and all of these places are industrialized. So, because of their close proximity to China, they are always ready to respond to the industrial demand or needs of China. I've already told you about the housing boom. Because of coronavirus, many people have lost their jobs. Many people have left the cities. Many people are going to suburbia, to suburban areas. And because of that, their housing prices are going up. The houses in the US, the houses in Japan, the houses in Korea, South Korea, they're made out of wood. So they are new synthetically developed wood or genetically developed wood that can grow acacious wood strong enough for building within 4 to 5 years. Also, that very wood can be turned into charcoal, and charcoal is big business as well. You know, Bridgestones and Yokohama tires have found a way to increase the tensile strength of tires using activated charcoal. Where can they get that charcoal? They can easily get it from the forest-rich areas of Southeast Asia and South Pacific. You know, so the Marshall Islands, Suriname, all of these places, they can use their forest reserve to respond to the new novel industrial needs, not only of China, but also the building demands of these first world countries that are at close proximity to them. What do I mean by that? These guys have been reducing their cocoa trees, they've been cutting it off and planting it with wood because of these industrial needs, yeah. And they have this, they played this particular kind of cover where they started talking about, oh, climate change is going to affect cocoa. This came up like some years ago. If you just Google climate change and cocoa, you hear this assessment of climate change impacts, and some people started even coming up with ideas that in the next 50 years, most cocoa farms wouldn't survive. And these guys quickly use that as a ruse to say, okay, then we'll have to replant cocoa trees with other trees that would make more economic um, uh, sense, will give more economic value, more monetary value compared to cocoa. What I'm simply saying is that on twofold fundamentals, you have land and then you have yield of the produce. Cocoa is not 70% coming from West Africa. I think it's about 80%. But we've tied ourselves to how much can we make out of it, because I believe as producers, we only have only 3.5% of the global value trade. The money, the spin-off of the money, because the money, of course, comes with your high-end chocolatiers in South Africa or your retail snacks like your Hershey bars and your Kit Kats. And we're not there in that value chain, we're just producers. But the production part is intrinsically made to suppress the price. That's why Africa stays poor, relying on just only exporting cocoa. Any chocolate that I eat now in Tokyo or somewhere in the US, it possibly was harvested 7 years ago in West Africa. So it was harvested, it was turned into the pods were broken up, the beans were taken up, dried and stored. And because the value chain is so lengthy and so long-winded that the cocoa beans can stay in storage somewhere in Africa, in a dingy place in Africa for 5 years before eventually it gets on the train. There's no much uh, um, leverage and advantage in that value chain where they can lead to price spikes. The value chain, the operationality of moving the produce into the global markets is done in a way that is so long-winded and so it suppresses the price. There are no advantages that you could take it up. You cannot create a scarcity. So the opportunities of, because I'm saying this with a pinch of salt, I'm not advocating trading. Yeah, I'm not advocating trading, cryptocurrency trading. What I'm advocating is let us see where the money is eventually coming in. The institutional funds are coming in, and when they come, the institutional funds will go to things that look and smell like what they are used to, things that would meet and appeal to their easy affinity when it comes to asset allocation and asset appreciation. So they'll be interested in land. They'll be interested in land that grows crops. And so that means it has land and yield. Now you can tag something to it. You can put asset tokenization on it. So if you have what I think is the monopoly of production, then also the monopoly of production on that land, you can now take it and put it in the crypto space and lead to asset tokenization. So I've gone to many places. So I think I'm mixing things up. This is just my WhatsApp. I just wanted to show this where I I I I did this presentation. This was where I was just showing about cocoa and how it comes to Japan and KitKat. It was a lot more expressive. These are videos that I can't show because YouTube wouldn't allow it to show on Powtoon. So I'm just saying, my people, my um, Ejagan people, most of us have cocoa farms that have been with us for generations. I have cocoa farms in my family that has been around for 300 years. And so even in the asset tokenization, you might not necessarily be drawing assets on the real terra firma land, but rather the cultural heritage of that land. And so if you put it in a particular space and the institutional funds start doing appraisals, they'll say, let's look at this crop, because cocoa is not a staple crop, so it's not going to get subsidies. Americans will give subsidies to the sugar, the millets, the rice. They wouldn't give it to cocoa, but it's still looked as a high-end crop, and it's always going to be valuable. Like I did in this presentation in China, in Japan. I'm just saying that because a lot of Chinese came to as well. I said we're now looking at a future where we might phase away petrol-fired engine. In They're putting caps in first world countries. 2030, 2035, you're going to have only EV cars, electric-fired vehicles. But nobody's looking at any future where you could say we're no more going to eat chocolates. It's not possible. Every Valentine's Day, the most organically authentic material consumed is chocolate because they are fake flowers. Yeah? So there's no future without chocolate. How come we've not made the most out of the monopoly is because we're a little bit one-dimensional from the state, where we see what the president of Ghana is trying to do with cocoa and the likes. But like I was saying, it's we have to be multidimensional. Because yeah, you want to improve more presence, you want to bring more value, add value to cocoa. Yeah, you want to add value to cocoa, but these are what I call catered markets in Switzerland, in Belgium, in France. So the chocolatiers have been around for years, and it's part of their nascent culture. So you have an advantage that, culturally speaking, they have to consume chocolate. You understand? They have to consume cakes, you know so you can find a way, or I think the young people can find a way and say, listen, we're not going to just line up and be trying to squeeze ourselves through this artery of get more value chain when it comes to the literal exports. How about we take the assets and we put them on the crypto space through asset tokenization. Because if you have digitized asset tied to this, I think eventually the institutional funds, when they come in, they'll come your way. So just wanted to give you guys these thoughts, and we're talking more. So all of our Ejagan people, all of your cocoa land where they from Akankwa to Ikop, get something up there. I see the